Welcome to The Late Show, 2nd of January 2025. I am standing in, or sitting in, this is a sit-in, for Howard. He's not feeling well, so remember Howard in your prayers. And I've had, about an hour's warning, and so I'll try and give you something which has really blown up in the news today, and it would be very helpful to have your views and your comments. And I'm going to start with a couple of scriptures which are from the Proverbs. The first one, very familiar, Proverbs 12, verse 22. If we bring that up on the screen, and then there's another proverb and then I'll tell you what the topic is. Lying lips are an abomination to the Lord, but those who deal truthfully are his delight. And then this other amazing proverb, the Lord detests differing weights, and dishonest scales do not please him. Well, I'm going to be talking a little bit about justice, and justice prides itself on having this equal balance, this fair balance, this blind adjudication, this lack of prejudice in the law. But we now have a Prime Minister who was once the Director of Public Prosecutions. He was a leading lawyer. He used to work for liberty, for human rights, often defending those who were attacking our country. So he's got a bit of track record. But what's blown up in the news today is that Jess Phillips, who is Keir Starmer's Minister for the Safeguarding of Women and Girls, she has refused to have an inquiry into what's been going on in Oldham. She's refused to have a national inquiry into the grooming gangs. And Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the opposition, has called for an inquiry into the grooming gangs. Now, this has gone on for years and years and years. The scale of the evil of the grooming and raping of English girls, white English girls, by these grooming gangs has basically been dealt with by the government on a piecemeal basis. There's been a little inquiry there, a little inquiry here, but not a public inquiry. And if we think back to Jimmy Savile, there were 60 or 70 girls and boys that he abused, and many more that he intimidated live on the BBC, on this great flagship programme, Jim Will Fix It. Now, that was in the tens of victims. This is in the tens of thousands of victims, and there's been absolute silence by over many, many years on the roots of this abuse and the perpetrators of the abuse. So we're going to look at it because it's very much a current issue. Jess Phillips, as I say, is the Minister for Safeguarding. Elon Musk has come out today and said she should go to prison. He feels very strongly about it. We had a situation also last summer where there were these riots. There was this unrest, and there was an email this morning mentioning Gavin Ashendon, who was the Queen's chaplain at Buckingham Palace. He was, let's say, very disappointed by what King Charles said regarding the murder of the 3 girls in Southport. The ensuing violence led to a lot of arrests, but a cover-up of who the perpetrator was. And we'll try and dig into this, but let's watch this. I just want to say one more thing before we watch Gavin Ashendon, and this is a few quotes, some of which you may be familiar with. The first is Joseph Goebbels, and I use this quote because I said there are tens of thousands of girls who have been abused, and this is what Goebbels said. If you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it. Now, in one sense, the big lie is that there's been a few isolated cases of grooming and rape. But that's the lie, because it's tens of thousands. So Joseph Goebbels says the lie can be maintained only for such time as the state, and bear in mind that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was to protect the citizens from the state, but we have an increasingly overbearing state. But this is what Goebbels is saying, and I would say some politicians are following his handbook. The lie can be maintained only for such time as the state can shield the people from the political, economic and or military consequences of the lie. It thus becomes vitally important for the state to use all of its powers to repress dissent, for the truth is the mortal enemy of the lie, and thus by extension the truth is the greatest enemy of the state. I think that is very revealing when you think of how the state has closed ranks, and we're not just talking about the Labour government, which has only been in power for 6 months or so. The Conservatives have a terrible record of covering up on this issue. Oh yes, David Cameron pats Sarah Champion on the back for exposing what was going on in Rotherham. Thousands of girls raped. But nothing was done. And it's been like a domino effect at Telford, Oxford, Oldham, many other areas, and actually an untold number of areas where they're just not lifting up the carpet to see the filth that's underneath. And I'm going to also quote Adolf Hitler, and he said this: "When an opponent declares, 'I will not come over to your side,' I calmly say, 'Your child belongs to us already.' You will pass on. Your descendants, however, now stand in the new camp. In a short time, they will know nothing else but this new community." Now, what has been happening in our country, and we all know over recent decades, over my lifetime, is a new community has emerged. And all of the values that we held dear, that many of us grew up under, have been swept aside, and a new community has emerged. And do you know what? When Anjem Chowdhury came into our studio for the debate on Islam and the future of Islam in the West, he was supremely confident that this Islamic tide that is sweeping across the Western world would prevail. And do you know why? Because the Western world largely is filled with deceit. It's detestable. It's an abomination. And Gavin Ashendon, who was a respectable clergyman, chaplain to the Queen, he came a cropper because he wouldn't bend to the lie. I'm first going to play, and then, by the way, I should just say you can email in with your thoughts and comments on what I think is one of the most important issues in this new year, and for us to consider in the months and the years ahead. But Gavin Ashendon commenting on the King's speech. I was prompted, I can't remember who wrote in this morning about it, but we'll play just the opening remarks from Gavin. And yeah, please do write in on your thoughts concerning this willful blindness to this wicked, evil exploitation of young girls across our country.
Hello and welcome. So King Charles has just made his Christmas speech. There's always been a lot of interest in the Queen's speech, or as it now is, the King's speech. It's been a way of telling the temperature about the monarchy, about society, about the state of Christianity in our country. Always there have been things to say about this that have been quite interesting. But this year, it seems to me we crossed a Rubicon where we're somewhere different. It's very hard to know, since we're quite close to the events, what made this crossing, what it was that we crossed, what made it so different. I think instinctively it may have been the murders in Southport. It may have been the cutting of the throats of our young children at the hands of somebody that the government lied to us about, told us was a Welshman, in order to keep the truth from us so that the pot of resentment, anger, and fury would not boil over, but it did begin to boil over a bit. And as it began to simmer, because people took to the streets in their rage and their fury and their despair, in their unknowing of what was going on, only convinced that the state was lying to them. As they took to the streets, so the state cracked down on them with a fury that was as unjust as it was brutal. And we have a number of people who are political prisoners serving time for things they said on Facebook or to the policeman. Remember that poor incompetent woman pushing a wheelie bin at the police. She fell over flat on her face. They picked her up and carted her off to prison. In terms of riot and rage against the state, it was a non-event. But the brutality of the state as it dealt with it was something extraordinary, and showed how frightened they are of us and of this resentment, how frightened they are that we know that they're lying to us and we won't have it anymore.
That was Gavin Ashendon. I interviewed him on Face to Face. I think it was last year. Now, and we'll show a short clip of that. But bear in mind, this guy had a great career in the church. But bit by bit, because he wasn't prepared to compromise, not only did he forego his position as the Queen's chaplain, eventually he was put in an impossible position regarding the Church of England. And so that's why he's there speaking on Catholic Unscripted. He's a man of conviction. Might not agree with all of his theology, but please do watch this short extract from the interview I did with Gavin, talking about his time at Buckingham Palace. It's really interesting, and so you're now in the chaplaincy of whatever that is within, is it right, Buckingham Palace? And how long were you there?
10 years.
10 years, yeah. And you were free to write and express, your scholarship.
I thought I was. I knew a certain amount about Islam. I taught Islamic studies as one of the postgraduate courses I set up at my university. I was a senior lecturer in psychology of religion, and every so often the press would ask me questions, particularly the Daily Mail, in fact, and I would give them the factual answers. But whilst the press was trying to make a distinction between Islamism and Islam, yeah, or Islamism and Muslims, which is
9/11,
right, exactly, which is an entirely facetious construction of the media industry, I would occasionally be asked theological questions about Islam or the Quran. I'd give answers, and it would set up repercussions. My poor daughter, who was a teenager at the time, we'd both get up about 6 o'clock, and she said, "Oh, Daddy, you're in the newspapers again today. Please stop doing it. It makes life at school so difficult." Yeah. And there came a point when the palace said, "This has got to stop," and invited me to make a choice between, well, either to self-censor myself, in which case I could continue in the part of royal ecclesiastical household, or to offer resignation, in which case, as far as they were concerned, I could do what I liked. So I resigned.
Giving you quite a few little clips as a backdrop to this subject of how the government and the media deliberately distort the facts. Now, Gavin mentioned in his New Year message this terrible murder. I was going to say tragedy, but it was as he said, the slitting of the throats of 3 young girls who didn't fit in with this Islamist agenda. Now, there was a massive cover-up. There was complete denial that there was any connection to, terrorism or Islamism. And yet, when on the 18th of December, just a couple of weeks ago, the teenager is accused of, they even say in the news, this is ITV News, accused of stabbing 3 girls. Well, he was caught in the act, but there we go, put that to one side. But in his possession were Islamist, jihadist pamphlets and manuals. They absolutely knew what it was. But Keir Starmer and others decided to make a massive, big shout against right-wing thugs, a lady with a wheelie bin, or people tweeting who are far-right extremists. And it was a classic example of obfuscation of the facts. Now, we had in this morning's news this terrible attack. They're on the front page of the Times, but they ring how the police had covered up an ISIS and Islamist flag. Now, you can understand how, the authorities don't want to have any escalation of a situation, but that shouldn't mean that you start falsely accusing the victims. And that's the terrible situation that we're now in. So I hope that you get the message. Now, also, we have from 2017 just a very short clip which just shows how Parliament tries to shut down this whole issue. Even the Speaker of the House of Commons shutting down even discussion on these subjects. It's unprecedented, actually. But a very brave politician who's in the House of Lords. He was, I think he was Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party under Mrs. Thatcher, Lord Malcolm Pearson. He makes the obvious comments in the House of Lords. He shouted down. I don't know whether we can show just this short clip where he says that most terrorists are Islamists. The government spokesperson, the lady spokesperson, who answers him, deliberately twists what he said. And just watch this clip to see what we're up against.
Since nowadays most terrorists are Islamists, could I ask? Could I ask why the government and the BBC and so on regularly describe them as Asian men? My lords, isn't this insulting to all Asian men in the world who are not even Muslims, let alone Islamists?
Well, I don't know which part of that statement I should disagree with first, but what I should say is that not all terrorists are Islamists. That is not the case. Of course, we've had some examples.
So did you notice that one? He said that most are, which is an irrefutable fact. She said, our position is that, not all terrorists are Islamists. Can you see the subtle shift? And of course, the jibes against a very brave man who is concerned for our communities. So as I say, it's blown up into quite a big issue. Just today, I think it is a right for us to talk about it. And Jane has written in, hopefully the first of many, just saying, is it not evidently an anti-Christ plan to destroy our country? I would say yes. It's an anti-Christian plan, it's an anti-God plan, and they're just digging in on their determination to accommodate Islam because of the demographics, because of the so-called democratic votes. And Labour have been falling over themselves to reassure these Muslim communities because they want to get the vote. I don't know whether you remember Angela Rayner saying, and on the first day we're going to call for, a Palestinian state, while she's surrounded by a whole load of imams and Muslim leaders up in the north, and who are just looking strangely at this woman in a red gown, who their religion says really is not not someone who should be in leadership at all. And of course, Lord Pearson has called out the treatment of women across the Islamic world. It's the degrading treatment, the devaluing of women. And it's not surprising that we have these Muslim gangs. So, as Kemi Badenoch says, we shouldn't have these just these independent, isolated inquiries that are localised. We should have a full national inquiry. Now, please write in, tell me what you think about it. So Jane carries on and says, we as a country turned our back on God many years ago, and this is the result. In the natural, it's hard to imagine how such evil can be perpetrated in our country. You're absolutely right, Jane. It's very difficult to talk about it. I mean, if you've got, as I have, a daughter, if you've got granddaughters, you've got young children, by the way, none of them are too young to be exploited by these gangs. And those who are involved in the gangs are public officials as well. They're working in citizens' advice bureaus, working for local governments. There's a hand-in-glove approach. And as I say, I mentioned Jimmy Savile. I don't know whether we put him up on the screen. You know, he was probably the most evil exponent in the media, and there were many, and there was an inquiry. But by the way, that was the inquiry mentioned there in The Guardian on the failings at the BBC, because they allowed girls to be terribly abused on the BBC. But within the studio, not just dozens and dozens and dozens were abused on live television. But the thing about it was they seemed to have an inquiry about some infirmary here where he was up to no good. There was an inquiry at Broadmoor. There were all sorts of inquiries. And when you look at it historically, you can't quite piece it together. And I think the same has been with these inquiries of the grooming gangs. It's obvious if we're any United Kingdom at all of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, we should have a country-wide inquiry and put all the pieces together and identify where the threat is. And not just say, well, we're going to smash the gangs. If you can't smash the gangs in your own towns and cities, how can we trust you, two-tier Keir, to smash the gangs overseas? Just to be fair, I want to show you the letters from Jess Phillips and a predecessor of hers on this issue of the Oldham inquiry. So I've got two letters here. One is from Jess Phillips to a council leader. Thank you for your letter of 17th of July. This was last year. She wrote in the 29th of October. But this is Jess Phillips, who's always going on about, you know, the rights of women. And she says, I believe it is for Oldham Council alone to decide to commission an inquiry into child sexual exploitation locally. Why? I mean, we've got roads and railways going all across the country. Why do we need to have some isolated news story of an inquiry at a local level on something so serious? I welcome the council's resolution to do this, as set out in your letter, to continue its important work with victims and survivors. Should the council choose to proceed, I would look forward to the inquiry's finding and ensuring that any lessons that can be learnt to improve the frontline response are adopted at a local and, where applicable, at a national level. Well, I just think that's a load of humbug. Sorry to express an opinion on Revelation TV, but it is humbug. And here we have, from the same government, probably the same civil servant wrote this letter, and this was by Amanda Soloway MP, who was a predecessor of Jess Phillips, saying, oh, we've had this independent inquiry into child sexual abuse. And I think that goes back many, many years. But the point is that they may have had an inquiry many years ago, but it's still going on. And the point is that inquiry spreads into many other areas, rightly, where you have had abuse in the Catholic Church, or abuse in the Church of England, or abuse by John Smythe and other forms of abuse in residential settings. But we're talking specifically about abuse by a certain sector of society, and you've got to call it out. You've got to do what Malcolm Pearson did and say, look, most of these characters are come from an Islamist approach which devalues women, and we're allowing them to teach children, to bring children up to view women in a demeaning way. So again, this is now 2022. This letter was written by Amanda Soloway. As the Oldham report highlighted, it's vital we continue to strengthen our multi-agency response to this crime. It isn't a crime. It's thousands and thousands and thousands of girls who have been abused. We've also introduced joint targeted inspections of local agencies' performance in protecting children. No, you haven't. You may have done a little bit of bureaucratic tinkering. We remain committed to confronting and combating this horrific crime whenever and wherever it occurs. Well, I don't think you are combating it, and that's the saddest reality of it. I don't know whether we have an opportunity to show there's a campaigner against the grooming gangs, and maybe let's, before we go there, let's have a look a little bit at Elon Musk. I wouldn't play it other than he's going to be the right-hand man of Donald Trump in a few days, so we may as well hear what Elon Musk has to say. There's a few of his so-called tweets. This one just says, look, in the UK, serious crimes such as rape require the Crown Prosecution Service's approval for the police to charge suspects. Who was the head of the CPS when rape gangs were allowed to exploit young girls without facing justice? Keir Starmer, 2008 to 2013. The next one, who is the boss of Jez Phillips right now? Keir Starmer. The real reason she's refusing to investigate the rape gangs is that it would obviously lead to the blaming of Keir Starmer, head of the CPS at the time. That's what we're up against. That's what we're up against. And I also just want to mention, I mentioned this independent inquiry into child sex abuse. We just got one more plate on that, which is in October 2022, this was a report, and you can look it up, of the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse. Of course, it was more wide-ranging than what I'm talking about today, but this is today's news, so I am drawing your attention to it. Let's read some of your emails. Thanks for writing it up. Otherwise, I would dry up. I've even got my water here, so. So this is Paul. Thank you very much for writing in. First of all, our prayers are for healing for Howard right now. Our thoughts regarding the subject this evening has a lot to do with the BBC Corporation, who are responsible for broadcasting truth. But we know that they do not. If anything, they manipulate our government and cover up many news stories. The BBC are a government in themselves. They are like a mafia. They spread lies and assist Parliament to do the same. It's time to have a public inquiry on how the BBC operates. I absolutely agree with that. Am I allowed to agree with readers? This is from Colin. Well done, well said, you're spot on. The nation is under attack. We must bring it to attention. Thank you. Howard, a viewer, Howard Conda, writes, I was watching GB News earlier this evening and we were invited to give our personal points of view on what you are speaking about now. They didn't leave their email address up long enough, so I tried several email addresses but could not connect. See my email below. As I was trying to say, it was it was someone called James who supports Jeremy Corbyn. So Howard, this is Howard's contribution. Thanks for your support, Howard. I really appreciate it. I've been a Christian for over 50 years. This is Howard's letter to GB News. And perhaps one or two misguided so-called Christians have committed terrorism. However, there have been hundreds of terrorist attacks by Muslims. It's easy to understand why this is the case, because Islam's teaching is to kill all the unbelievers and especially Christians and Jews. Jesus said to love your enemies and pray for them, and this makes a big difference to our actions. Afraid so. Someone said the difference between Islam and Christianity is that Muslims, when they kill, are following the lead of Muhammad. They're following the words of Muhammad. Christians who kill in the name of Christ are not following the teachings of Jesus. He said, love your enemies, do good to those, pray for those who do evil towards you. And also, when men persecute and speak all kinds of evil against you because of me, rejoice, great is your reward in heaven. Not, great is your reward in heaven if you go and kill a load of people in New Orleans on New Year's Day. Deb writes, do you think cowardice, lazy complacency are destroying our Christian country? I don't want to get involved is now the order of the day. All the best for 2025. Yeah, I think it is cowardice, Deb. I think it is laziness. But sadly, I think it's cynical power politics to gain the Muslim votes. And we've now reached a situation where it's become critical for Labour because, if you remember, there were defections. I think 4 constituencies went to those who were advocating for Hamas and the Palestinian cause, and they got into Parliament. So it's a real political issue. It's a demographic issue. And I would say that they make a political calculation. These girls who are the victims on a mass scale are not going to be a big vote puller, but the Muslim communities, especially in the north, at a local council and a mayoral election level, a big vote is out there, and of course for the national poll as well. This is from John. They say they follow God and love Jesus more than me, and yet they deny the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. There is no salvation in this religion. Well, that's the Christian position. There's salvation in no one else. There's no other one under heaven other than the Lord Jesus. He says, I'm the only way. No one comes to the Father. No one gains salvation except through me. The Lord Jesus said that. But he didn't say kill or let's convert or die, as we had in the Catholic Church in the Middle Ages. And I'm afraid that a lot of the conquest, I'm not afraid, it's just a historic fact, of Islam, in the Middle Ages was through conquest, military conquest and conversion by the sword. Nicole says, I met Gavin Ashendon many years ago at Sussex University, and I'm absolutely certain that Gavin is a sincere and godly man with strong moral values, and I deeply respect him. I thought I should let you know. That's from Nicole. Thanks for writing that. Yeah, I also have a lot of respect for him. There were little details of Catholic theology. I had a good old, tete-a-tete with Gavin, but he's a really great guy. Grooming gangs. This is from Charmaine. The British government is taking money from the Muslim Brotherhood, who is buying up Britain and paying government officials. I wonder if we investigated Keir Starmer's banking accounts to see how he has enriched himself. This is the reason why they won't investigate the grooming gangs. They are being paid to keep quiet. Yeah, I don't think it's just personal to Keir Starmer. Even Gordon Brown tried to pour cold water on investigating this issue, but it is an issue and it's not going to go away. And people don't like mentioning Tommy Robinson, but he's all over social media at the moment because he has been absolutely silenced. Now, whether or not you support him, is it right that someone should be silenced? People are scared. They think, oh, well, we don't want extremism. Who wants extremism? There was a time when Nigel Farage was, seen as the new Nick Griffin. And you see this cycle where people are ostracized and isolated and sent to Coventry. And then a few years later, you say, oh, actually, he was right, what he said. And even Jordan Peterson and his wife interviewed Tommy Robinson because what he was saying was true. So don't attack the man. Don't do the ad hominem argument. I don't mind being attacked, by the way, but you always attack the messenger. But why don't you just listen to the message? And it's shouting at us in our country. Norma writes, thank you for bringing this gruesome, murky, disgusting subject up tonight. The cover-up of Islamic gangs who perpetrate sexual offences on our children is really out of order. And our law and order is of no effect. We need to stand up and shine the light of Jesus Christ on all of this. Above all, not to be afraid to speak out, speak the truth, and to expose once and for all fully the two-tier system that our society has become. Thank you for ashamed, you say, Norma, ashamed to be British. Sad. But we should never be ashamed of the gospel. But I'm afraid I share your feelings, because it's not the country I grew up in. And by the way, it wasn't a perfect country. There were, even gang, warfare, throwing half bricks between two local schools, and I was caught in the middle as a little boy. It's not a perfect country, but it's definitely pretty well lost all trace of the civility that we had. Where you left your doors open, you left your car unlocked even, and your children could play in the streets. That can't happen anymore, I'm sorry to say. Christians should be taught about the raging war in heavenly places, the demonic forces. Not enough prayer is against this. That was an anonymous text. Dawn writes, many thanks for the programme. Yes, most terrorists are jihadists. We are like a lobster in a pan of boiling water facing a takeover by these people. And as I said this morning, Lord Kerry, former Archbishop of Canterbury, said at a public meeting a few months ago, I was in attendance, that it's false to draw a distinction between Islam and Islamism. And fundamentalist Islam. He said they are one in the same. And again, Lord Pearson has been saying it for 20 years, and others who are just sneered at and mocked and cancelled in the public square, but they're speaking the truth. Dawn says this, carrying on. Yes, there should be a national inquiry into the child sex abuse, the grooming of girls and women. Let all things that are hidden come out into the light. So glad that I did not get onto the Jimmy Savile programme, as I wrote to the BBC when I was a little girl. You dodged the bullet there, Dawn. This is from Mr. M. Lots of Muslim teachers in other countries are told their young men, or tell their young men to go and Islamize the UK. At least 25 years ago, some teachers were on the religious channels. Absolutely. This is from Eileen. Tim, this sort of cover-up has been going on for years, mostly the Labour Party, but now we see that any of the political parties will not on any account tell the honest truth about this vitally important matter, which will only get worse with the completely uncontrolled immigration we are seeing at the moment. I think we are seeing God's judgment on us as a country, firstly because of our turning our back on God and the Bible and have embraced the most ungodly activities, and our unjust treatment of the Jews and the cover-up of the massive anti-Semitism which we are going through. Be assured, God is not mocked. What we have reaped, we will sow. Things will only get worse as we move towards the end times, such as a quick drink of water. A quick breather. I'm not sure. Someone can prompt me in my ear whether we have the other clip. We're getting there. Good. Cheers. Happy New Year. God bless Rev TV for bringing these things to us. Deb writes again, too much insanity, lack of truth, not reality. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. He is the solution to the lies and the insanity. Don't we all need to wake up before it's too late? You're absolutely right, Deb. I heard Barack Obama, when he was running for election the first time, so it must have been 2008, being interviewed in a big public meeting at Rick Warren's church, the Saddleback Church, I think it's called, down in San Diego or somewhere in California. And he was asked the question from the audience, is Jesus the only way? And he was very clever in his answer. He said, Jesus is the only way for me. But the quote from the Lord Jesus is, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Wait for it. No one comes to the Father except through me. The Lord didn't give the option for us to say, oh, it's just my personal truth. You can have your truth. You can have your faith. No, he said, no one. It was an exclusive claim. No one comes to the Father except by me. So it was a very clever answer to say, oh, yes, he's the way for me. But no, you can't, the Lord doesn't give us that option. We have to be honest about our own faith, let alone about the other faiths. Okay, I didn't hear that someone gave me a message in my ear, but I didn't hear it clearly. Okay, let's have a look at this. We have a clip on the London terror attacks. That's right, I remember it as though it was yesterday. It was on the 21st of July 2005 when Howard was out on the streets, and it was the King's Cross attack, if I'm correct, where again, Islamist terrorists came down from Leeds and they attacked, I think, 4 locations in London. A great loss of life. Howard there was reporting on the spot in 2005. Have a quick watch of this and I'll have a drink of water.
Hi, this is Revelation TV, just reporting right here in the corner of Warren Street and Fitzroy Square. Today is the 21st of July, and again there's been several incidents here in the heart of London. Centre of London may not be in the centre of God's will right now, but I don't think anybody has the right, and I'm speaking as a Christian, to bring judgment on us other than God himself. And I do want to say that, for the Islamic fundamentalists who have this terrorist mentality, that the God of Abraham is a joint forefather of the Christian, the Jew, and the Mohammedans, or Islamic faith. Now, Moses is someone that you recognize as being a prophet. All of us recognize that. And he was given the oracles of God. He was given the 10 Commandments. Number 1, I reckon, that we need to take note of in times like this is the fact that it says very clearly, thou shalt not kill, or thou shalt not murder. Now, you can be a murderer or a martyr. A martyr is someone who gives up his own life. It isn't someone who gives his life or her life up at the expense of others, okay? It's someone who gives their life and lays their life down like Jesus Christ did, and many of the other martyrs like Stephen and some of the other prophets. So I would say to those who have a mindset that they think they're doing God a favor by taking their life and others, particularly those in the West who are against the, sort of maybe God's laws, but it's not your job to do God's job, okay? I just want to say that because Revelation TV has a unique position and been able to speak prophetically and at times like this. So please, all of you out there who think they're going to follow suit and do this and take God's place in bringing some sort of judgment upon London or the British people or those in the United Kingdom or anywhere else in the world for that matter, just think again, because you won't be going to heaven. It's very clear. Those that murder, those that steal, those that fornicate, those that bring judgment upon themselves really will not get into the kingdom of God. So to all you would-be suicide bombers out there, think again. Read your Quran, but more important, read the Bible. Thank you.
But then it all got serious, so many ambulances, fire engines.
The roads were blocked and we came out of the office.
And then after some time the cops came in and they said you have to evacuate the office and come on, move to the left, move to the right and all that.
We just thought another Thursday, 7 July.
This city isn't going to come to a stop. Only God has the power and the right.
Yeah, they're killing so many people. They're all innocent people. They're all dying for unnecessary. There's no reason as such for them to be killed.
That's right.
Killing yourself is not going to Allah. You're losing your children, you're losing your families, and it's not going to Allah. Who knows where they're going to?
We're not going to let a handful of people like this terrorize us or frighten us out of this. This country has been through great things to come this far, to have freedom. What do we want to do? Go back into the dark ages?
If you're leaving home, you don't know whether you're going to get back home or not. It's one of those things now.
We're just living one day at a time. We're just living one day at a time. We don't know what is going to happen tomorrow.
Next moment,
Maybe we don't know what is going to happen next Thursday.
I'll probably say what Tyndale said. May God open the eyes of these people and reveal the light and the truth to them. They've gone so far away all of the people have gone so far away from the Word of God that, and I wish that they would turn back. This nation was great only because it's had its eyes focused on God.
I'm right in Tottenham Court Road right now, and it's the 21st of July. It's about 6 o'clock in the evening. The road is blocked off. You've got all the media here, and everybody's on their way home, but there's no way for them to get home on public transport at the moment. And as you can see, the helicopters are flying around, and also you've got all the media, as I say. But what are people really thinking? Do they care? Look at some of the faces. They're probably not really too worried, because we've already become used to this. Only a week ago, people were being killed and maimed, and yet today, as you look around at the faces, they don't seem to be put out at all. Today we're right in the middle of the heart of London, and 21st of July. It's a shame that it's almost a repetition of the 7th of July, and as you look behind me, you'll see there's an empty street here in Tottenham Court Road. Thousands, hundreds of thousands of people can't get home. They're all leaving from work right now. But what will be tomorrow? Will they have fear in their heart and mind about coming back to work? I don't know. Just have a look down there. As you'll see, there are many thousands of people now making their way north out of London, and I'm sure it's probably exactly the same in the south. You'll see way back in the distance there, you've got Centre Point in the background, you've got helicopters also hovering above. But as I said earlier, really, you look at people's faces here, there's not really panic or fear. The terrorists may have thought that they put fear into the Londoners, but we Brits, we United Kingdom people, are very resilient. After all, 2 world wars, and we came through. We're only a little island, and yet even the toughest of nations that have come against us, historically speaking, have never ever prevailed. Well, not quite true. But nevertheless, if you look at history, you'll find that it's not easy, because Britannia does rule the waves, and we want to just reassure those that live in London particularly, but all those in other cities or parts of the British Isles, the United Kingdom, that they don't have to have fear in their heart and mind, because especially as a believer in Jesus Christ, we know that fear does not originate with us, but is something that the devil will actually put into our hearts. And he's not going to do that today. God bless you. As you can see here, there is multimedia in action. Many TV stations, reporters, etc.
Thank you very much. That was Mr. Howard Conda reporting in 2005. But there's nothing new under the sun, and this issue has just stayed with us. And the list is very long. These terrorist outrages, and even a friend of mine stabbed a member of Parliament, David Amos. Shocking. Now, why are the politicians not really getting to grips with it? Why is the civil service not getting to grips with it? There's an article in the Telegraph today saying that this is an ex-Labour chairman who told this guy, Simon Danchuk, former Rochdale MP, he told him not to raise the grooming gang ethnicity because they would lose votes. And there you have it. And we, I'm afraid, have a lot of corruption in our politics. There isn't the integrity that there used to be. We know that, as was reported in the mainstream news and the Heart newspaper with Melanie Simmons, this is the most godless parliament ever. They refused to take the oath of allegiance to the coronation oath, to the crown, and to God. That's the people who are governing us at the moment. Now, there's a guy, we're going to show a short clip of a guy who's been campaigning on this issue for quite a long time. This is only an extract from what he had to say. He introduces himself, but he gets to this issue of Labour's refusal to deal with the issue because of votes. And then I'll come back to your emails.
My name is Raja Mir. I suppose I'm a whistleblower in the scheme of things. I'm a former, I advised government for a long time. I worked in central government. I worked under the Labour Party. I The last big project I had contracts with the Office for Security and Counter-Terrorism. I'm very well regarded in the profession I come from. Oldham is my hometown. The politicians in Oldham, Labour Party run, have covered up the grooming and gang rape of children, and the police have been involved, and they've been trying to silence myself and a growing number of campaigners in this town. And despite the best efforts, we have taken down 3 successive council leaders. And what are we campaigning for? A public inquiry into the cover-up of gang rape of children. It's not, you know, how contentious is that? We want to safeguard our children. We want those who failed them to be held responsible. And most of all, we want those who raped our children to be arrested and prosecuted. The way we take these people out, and this is why they're scared of what I've done, essentially, is I spent time with the Labour Party. I spent time at the height of the Labour Party. I've seen how to campaign in communities, and I've seen what they've done, and I've just used everything I've learnt and brought it back into a town I understand very well. The Labour Party is dependent on a bloc vote. It's a bloc Muslim vote, and for that bloc vote to be effective, the white working class have got to be disempowered and feel that there's no point in voting. I got called a racist by saying I got the white vote angry. And I'm thinking, hold on, I got people angry. I got people angry that their children were being dragged off the street and raped. And I ran a campaign to say, these are the politicians who are covering it up. They won't support a public inquiry, vote them out. We get people angry for a reason that they care about. And people care about their children. What we also did, and this is really, really interesting, was we got people to tactically vote. This is a white, working class white, very strong Labour, yeah? You know the cliches, you know, put a red rose out on a donkey or worse, yeah? This is that sort of place. We've got people to vote Conservative. We've got lifetime Labour supporters to vote Conservative to remove Labour Party politicians in Labour Party strongholds. And the reason we managed to do that is go and speak to people.
Okay, he's a political campaigner, but he's exposing something that's been going on that's been covered up. And Eileen says this sort of cover-up has been going on for years, mostly the Labour Party. Now we see that any of the political parties will not on any account tell the honest truth about this vitally important matter, which will only get worse with the completely uncontrolled immigration we're seeing at the moment. I think we are seeing, actually I've probably read that one. By the way, just if you haven't already noticed, this whole program has been done on the fly, and we're trying to give you as much information as possible. So apologies if there's a few glitches. Brian, especially from my, faltering tongue. Brian says, if I'm not mistaken, isn't it the belief of Islam that they can lie to anyone that is not of their faith, even to the extent of taking their lives, as this is written in their holy book and the hadiths? Do you think that this may be what has influenced most of our politicians now to become liars as a matter of course? Now, I think that the heart is deceitful above all things, the scripture says, and anyone can go down that road. I'm just going to read a few more, Brian. If I can get back to you, I will. Mike mentions about 30 Labour MPs that have resigned today. I think, Mike, they were councillors who resigned, but quite a large block of councillors resigned because Labour has abandoned its traditional values. Thomas and Diane, it says in the Bible that we should pray for our enemies. I was thinking the other day, the devil is our biggest enemy. I wonder how we should pray for Satan. I just said our Father, and I left it with God. With regard to praying for Satan, I think he's had his shout for all eternity, and I think we should be rebuking and renouncing and calling out the work of the evil one, but being careful that we don't corrupt ourselves in the process. This is from Stefan. Thank you for enlightening us on the evils of those in power. Happy New Year and showers of blessings. Lynn says, I think there is a presenter on GB News called James Schneider. I think he supports Jeremy Corbyn. Is this who Howard is talking about? Question mark. It might come up in the future. We can't cover that now. Bob has said, Elon has been strongly supporting Tommy Robinson. This has been raised on the mainstream media like ITV News. Now we're waiting to see if Nigel Farage will also start to support Tommy, who he has said on film that he is a Christian. And Donald says, when a nation turns against Israel, the Bible declares there will be judgment against them. Genesis 12, 11-3. or maybe 11 to 13. May God have mercy on us and help us to pray. I believe the decline in morality and the rise of Islam are symptoms of a deep spiritual malaise in this land. Totally agree. And then Mike says, aren't the globalists using Islam to corrupt Christian countries and to crush them? So it'll be easier to bring in the Antichrist. That is a worthwhile thesis to explore. And then Stephen says, isn't it very interesting that all these refugees needing rescue or needing sanctuary from Muslim dictatorships, tyranny and oppression only come into the UK and demand these same Sharia laws and Islamic rules, and to bring it upon us themselves yet again, and to drag as many ordinary British citizens along with them? It's a fiasco. We should see right through it, but it's protected, even hidden from the ordinary citizen. I hope I've helped to enlighten us all on the subject, because we just have to speak the truth to the best of our ability, and guard our own hearts, because as again it says in the Proverbs, it's the wellspring of life. Guard your heart with all diligence. Be careful that we don't get sucked into this evil. It's shameful to even mention what the disobedient do in secret. How do we balance that with calling out such evils? But certainly, just pray for wisdom, pray for righteousness to prevail, and pray for the media to be more honest in scrutinizing politicians, and for church leaders to stand up and speak the truth. God bless you. Have a happy new year.